Shields up, Ironbreakers. Rurikhan here coming at you with another video. Welcome back to Sunbreak, and today we're going to be talking about build potential, or as most people call it in the Monster Hunter community, mixed set potential. I still like to call them builds because I come from a different background, but you know, that's neither here nor there. This way everybody understands it. Builds / mixed sets, whatever you feel like calling it. I feel like that potential, at least at this particular point in time, is completely wild. And that is because I've been experimenting with different mixed sets for Gunlances, and I've been finding a lot of really interesting playstyles, which, you know, this is always something that I do whenever a new Monster Hunter game comes out. You know, I figure out, okay, which one is the best set that kind of like works for me, which one am I dealing the most damage with, and then I'll figure that out and I'll be happy with it, and then I'll move on to a different weapon to start working on guides for different weapons and so on. The thing that's been happening with Sunbreak is that I haven't been able to reach the point where I'm like, okay, I figured out the Gunlance, I figured out how everything works, because every single experiment that I'm doing, I'm not reaching the conclusion that I usually reach. So like, for instance, when I was playing Rise, it was very obvious early on that once you unlock Ground Splitter, you go Ground Splitter, that's like the meta choice, it is what it is, and Hail Cutter is just a piece of trash. So then I would do builds experimenting with Hail Cutter, like the whole, you know, you've seen a couple of Gunlance builds from me in Rise where I would be going like, oh, I'm just gonna go blast dash, and then as I reach the monster, I'll start aerial shelling, and then when I reach the, you know, when I run out of shells, I'm gonna pop Hail Cutter and come crashing down to the monster, into a full burst, into then a wide sweep, into a worm stake, and there's all these crazy combos that you could do with the Hail Cutter builds that I did, and it was a ton of fun. Aerial shelling, all of that stuff. I thought that that was extremely fun. As a matter of fact, I thought that that was way more fun than playing Hail Cutter, because Hail Cutter was just about juggling, you know, your buff duration and trying to maximize the damage of your shells while that buff was up, not being able to sheath your weapon. There was a lot of limiting factors. There still are a lot of limiting factors to actually using Ground Splitter, so it was always more interesting to me to do the aerial playstyle. Now, having said that, it was also very obvious to me that the aerial playstyle was never going to reach the potential power of playing with Ground Splitter. Whereas now, I've been experimenting with skills when it comes to Sunbreak. I've been doing all kinds of stuff like, hey, let's just do a pure shelling, wide shelling playstyle and see how that works out. And it's pretty good. Let's do poke, shell, poke and see how that works out, because, you know, we can scale pokes better than we can scale shelling. For those of you that don't know, there's a really low ceiling that you can hit when it comes to shelling damage, because, you know, shelling damage is extremely limited. It's always been the case. It's all about your shelling level and about like your food buff and your artillery, and that's pretty much it. You've reached your shelling ceiling. Although this time around there's also like a rampage decoration that can increase that by just a little smidge more, but you know, it's always very limiting. Unlike, for instance, if you look at a Charge Blade's files, which, you know, both get scaling from raw damage as well as attack and anything else that changes attack. We can't really do that with shells, just in case you guys don't know that. So that is always an experiment that I like to play around with and try to figure out different playstyles, and usually I can identify, okay, this playstyle is fun, but it's not really particularly powerful. And the thing that is happening with Sunbreak is that every time I come up with like a new playstyle, I'm like, okay, so this is fun, this is actually also very powerful. Like, as I've told you guys in my build video yesterday, I'm currently working on a wide shelling set that is going to try and do its best to include elemental damage, because I've always been someone who's like, I just like the idea of having, building like a different set for a different monster and being about the elemental advantages that that set can bring to the fight. That's always been something that I like, even though, you know, some monsters have bad hit zones and stuff like that. So, you know, it's not going to be a one-size-fits-all. You're not going to be able to be like, oh, I did my ice set, so every monster that's weak to ice, this is going to work on, because some monsters just have bad ice hit zones. And you're going to be like, well, in this one, maybe I'll want to use raw damage instead, because, you know, the elemental hit zones are not particularly good. Now, having said that, in Sunbreak, just playing around with all of these builds is really just blowing my mind. Because in Iceborne, when I tried doing the elemental shelling playstyle, it was very obvious from the get-go that, look, you can put as much element as you want in here, you can scale this thing as much as you want. I could even get like max shelling level because we had the Safi'jiiva Gunlances, which I could put at max wide shelling level and then stack them full of elemental damage, and then use the Safi'jiiva armor to get additional elemental damage on there. But after stacking all of those things up, I'd go up to a monster and I'd hit him once and I'd be like, wow, that poke was pretty pathetic, huh? In Sunbreak, it actually feels like that is not the case. Now, I could be wrong. Maybe my testing is not completely thorough yet. I am doing more experiments with it, but there definitely seem to be a lot of cases where that elemental damage is kicking in to high gear, and it just feels good to play that playstyle. And not just that, but like another thing is also in my Gunlance guide video, I was like, okay, so the most damage I can possibly deal at this moment in time is clearly spamming Bullet Barrage. And that is definitely the case for, you know, a lot of Gunlances. If you're able to spam Bullet Barrage nonstop, you're going to get a crap ton of damage. Now, one of the things that I've noticed is that if I go into wide shelling and I go straight into like poke shell poke with certain sets, and again, this is not going to be, you know, you're going to need very specific sets with like a bunch of critical on them. You're going to need a bunch of either elemental damage or a bunch of raw damage. But I've noticed that with certain sets, I was actually able to out-damage Bullet Barrage. And I was like, oh, this is surprising. I did not expect that. Now, that's not to say that the Bullet Barrage playstyle is not meta for most monsters, because it's just from the standpoint of safety. If a monster is big enough, Bullet Barrage is just beast. You're just dealing tons of damage. You go in, and the attack itself kind of like pulls you back. A lot of times allows you to dodge things. Like using Bullet Barrage, I'm doing like the fastest Almudrons I've ever done, because Almudron is just a huge friggin' monster that is also vulnerable to fire. So whenever you Bullet Barrage him, it really does a crap ton of damage. So you're just like, you know, shelling with impunity. But experimenting with different things, like for instance the other day I saw a notification from Ryu in my feed, and you know, this is something that I always like to shout out whenever I see another creator and stuff like that. Ryu is a Gunlance speedrunner. He's like the best Gunlance player I've ever seen as far as I'm concerned, and I didn't really watch his run because he was fighting a monster that I haven't unlocked in the game yet. But you know, I opened up the video and then I was like, okay, this is a monster that I haven't fought. I don't want to watch this. But I did notice his Gunlance choice, which he was using the Pyre Arachna Kadaki Gunlance. And I was like, huh, why is that? Now, I know that this is a normal shelling 8 Gunlance, but still, you know, normal shelling 8, it's whatever. It's a little bit harder to use, in my opinion, because the shells don't go as far. You get less damage from worm stakes. There's all these downsides to using normal shelling. But I was like, okay, but Ryu is using it, so let's just do a quick test. And I tried doing something where, okay, I'm going to do a build for this Gunlance, and I'm going to just like Bullet Barrage spam this training dummy. And that's what I did. I Bullet Barrage spammed it, and then I'm like, okay, and now let's just go Ground Splitter, full burst combo, non-stop. And it beat Bullet Barrage, and I was like, wait, what? I mean, not by much, but it did beat it. But it surprised me a lot. And this is something that I'm very curious to know if this is the case for other weapons as well. Like, I don't know how many of you guys are as into build, you know, figuring out builds as I am, but I'm very curious if this is something that you're, you know, that you're experiencing on your end with your weapons, because I just feel like, you know, at this moment in time, as we are still, you know, a little bit unsure of what the meta is going to be. I mean, like, I'm sure that there's already people mathematically figuring out what the best set for each weapon is going to be, what the best weapon to use, with the best charm, and all of that stuff. But it hasn't really been, I feel like at least it hasn't really been fully figured out yet. This is a very exciting time for the community to be experimenting with these things. And I'm super curious as to where you guys land on that. Like, do you guys feel like there's a wide variety of playstyles for most weapon that is not only viable, because anything is viable so long as you're willing to compromise on the time of a hunt, right? But not only viable, but actually just really good in terms of doing different things. Because that's the way that I feel, and it's really exciting, because I feel like with previous Monster Hunter games, right, I would usually figure out, okay, this is the way to play Gunlance, boom, I'm done. move on to the next weapon for a little bit. Of course, Gunlance always going to be my main, but I'll move on to the next weapon to start working on guides and doing all of these things. But in this one, I can't move away from the Gunlance because every time I try out something new, I'm like, hey, this thing's got legs. And I think it has something to do with the skills that we have as well. Like the changes that they've done to chain crit is definitely something that I'm utilizing in my wide shelling elemental build. The changes that they've done to other skills are also interesting, like the fact that there's blood right. Like I also saw Chaos Slayer's build, where, I mean, I didn't actually see the build. I saw that the results, right? I wasn't paying too much attention to the build itself, but the whole point was blood right and the amount of healing that he was getting with blood right. And I was like, dude, that is a lot. And on top of it, he goes like, and he puts some regen on his like omega tanky build, right? Which is really cool to see. And again, the build potential right now feels completely and utterly wild. Is this just me? Am I just like living in a bubble right now? I'm very curious to hear from you guys. How has it been with your weapon of choice? Like, leave me a comment. Let me know in the comment section, like, hey, I'm playing Switch Axe. I think that there's like one viable build and everything else is trash. Or, hey, I'm playing Switch Axe and I can't figure out for the life of me which skills I want to use. Because that's the other thing, right? You got the Switch skills coming in as well. And I'm constantly swapping them around, trying to figure out, dude, do I want to open up with Ground Splitter, or do I want to open up with Bullet Barrage? Do I want to open up with freaking Wyvern Fire into Bullet Barrage, because then you can cancel out the Roar? So I should have Bullet Barrage on my red set, then swap that around to the blue set, and then there's armors that actually get affected by the set that you're in. Like, I'm not going to go into spoiler detail, but to give you guys an idea of what some of these skills do, there's straight up some skills that'll be like, hey, if you're in the red scroll, we're going to increase your elemental and status, and if you're in the blue scroll, we're going to increase your attack and stun power. And then there's another one where it's like, if you're in the red scroll, we're going to increase your defense and elemental defense, and if you're in the blue scroll, we're going to make your stamina unlimited. And I'm just like, bro, what is going on with these skills? Like, there's just so many things to experiment with that it's wild. And also, this is obviously the reason why I have to apologize to you guys, because I don't know when I'm going to be able to get away from the Gunlance. I'm really sorry. This is just like, but I'm having so much fun with it. Are you guys enjoying it as well? Let me know in the comment section down below. If you guys enjoy my Sunbreak content, feel free to subscribe, hit the bell notification icon. That really helps out. Hit the like button, all of that jazz. You know, do all the usual YouTube stuff. Thank you all very much for watching this video. I'll see you guys in the next one. Stay strong, stay safe. Peace out.
Don't mind me.